Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the PD Res channel for another track guide. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Class B Xfinity car around Charlotte Motor Speedway. And I gotta say, I'm pleasantly surprised by this combo this week. I was really afraid the car setup was just going to feel really tight and awful, but it doesn't. It feels really fun, and it's actually enjoyable to drive and pretty fun to race. Jumping headfirst into this today, steering ratio and brake bias. So steering ratio, I like a 12 to 1 or a 14 to 1. And brake bias, a 62% front, although you really don't use the brakes around here. It is helpful to have them a little bit more rear biased. That way, if you do need to get onto them, hopefully you won't lock up the front tires and go sliding up towards the wall. You'll maybe get the car a little bit loose and it'll give you a little bit more control if you need to avoid an accident. So continuing on with our momentum, let's go ahead and take a look at the track map and discuss some of the car handling characteristics. Two things should jump out at you pretty immediately here. The first of them being that turns 1 and 2 are longer and a bit wider than turns 3 and 4, and the little straightaways on either side of the dogleg by the start-finish line are slightly different lengths. So if you're trying to time everything in your head on where you are on the track and your turning points, know that it will be different from one side of the track to the other. It's not a symmetrical track. So you don't have to drive each side of the track wildly different, but there are certain things to be aware of. For example, you can carry a little bit more speed down into turn 1 and pick up your throttle a little bit earlier than you can in turn 3. The exit of turn 2 comes up pretty quick, but it doesn't really surprise you. If you're getting tight, you kind of feel like you've got some time to make some changes or to switch up your driving a little bit. The exit of turn 4 comes up really fast, and looking at the map you can really see why. Because coming out of turn 2 you have all this room and the turn is a bit wider. Coming out of turn 4, even though it does open up a bit, you're still making a tighter turn. And so, because you have that tighter radius, that wall really does come up fast. It doesn't really open up until you're done with your corner, so it just kind of feels pinched off. I want to talk handling characteristics, just like a very basic overview really of the handling characteristics of the car throughout a race. At the start of the race on cold tires, you're going to feel pretty loose about everywhere. On corner entry, mid-corner, and corner exit's going to feel pretty loose. As the tire warms up, it kind of changes to a few laps into the run. The car will feel relatively neutral. It'll feel pretty stable, and you'll feel like you can put it anywhere that you really need to drive it. On a longer green flag run, so this is where you're going to notice how you've been driving the car. Your tires are really going to tell on you here. So if you've been overdriving the corner entry a bit or using too much steering lock to get through the middle part of the corner and to enter the corner, then those front tires are getting hot, they're going to start losing grip, and so those two corner phases might start feeling a bit tighter, so you're going to feel like the car's not cooperating with you very much. And you'll notice it either driving up towards the wall on exit and you have a tough time trying to stay away from the wall, or kind of counterintuitively, it might start snapping loose as you exit the corner. So as the track begins to flatten out on the backstretch, if you still got a lot of steering lock into the car and you're trying to throttle up really heavy, then the back of the car might start coming around just because you've got so much steering wheel into the car. And if you've done pretty good on your corner entry phase, but you've been a little too heavy footed on your throttle coming out of the corner, then you could also experience that loose feeling, but it won't be so much of a snap loose as it will be more of a slower transition into almost spinning out. So to sum that up really fast, if you are overdriving your corner entry and mid-corner phase, then what's likely going to happen is the car is going to transition to being really, really tight in the middle of the corner and possibly as you exit. If the car just jumps loose all of the sudden when you get close to exiting the corner, then you've got too much steering lock into the car. And then on the other side of that coin, if you've done pretty decent on corner entry phase, but you're too heavy footed on mid corner to exit, then the car is going to have this longer time where it feels loose. About the time that you get back on the throttle, it's going to feel like it's just horrendously loose. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but there are ways to kind of remedy that as you go through the race. Okay, so now we got that out of the way. Let's go ahead and take a look at the lap before we talk about anything else. That way we have a good visual reference for what's going on. And coming across the line to set a 30.929, which was the best I was able to get. I've seen some people in the 8s, which hats off to you if you're able to do that. I don't know why you're here. So the out lap and lap 1 of qualifying, I take a little bit easy just to warm up the car, not really push anything, because this track is really tough on tires. So this would be lap 2 of qualifying. Kind of enter high, take a good line down and get a turn so you can get just as much power down as possible. And you're going to want to stay somewhat low, and you almost clip these limits of the track down here by the fake grass. Slowing this section down, so we're going to look for this red sign on the right side of the track as our turn-in point. So here I've kept the throttle on enough so that the back of the car gets a little bit light. That's what I'm feeling. I had to play with the steering and manage that. You're completely out of the gas for a little bit, just letting the car slow down, not using any brakes, but just letting the cornering slow the car down. Once you get to about mid-corner, you can start feeding back in some throttle, and on fresh tires, you can be fairly aggressive, but do be aware that the car is still kind of light in the back end, and it still might want to come around on you. So get back to the throttle as much as you can and drive it out. Might get a little bit loose on exit. Now, you're also going to look for the Coca-Cola sign again right here as you start your turn in. Car's light in the back end as we turn in. Now we're just managing the throttle and adding in as much as we can without losing the rear of the car. Coming off the corner gets a little bit hairy, and you see we got the steering wheel straight for that last part of the corner. And then you do the same thing you did to start your lap. Okay, so now you're prepared with a pretty decent qualifying lap and a good foundation to build on. So you also need to know how to drive on older tires, because a lot of these races, hopefully, are going to go green flag. So the way you drive the car with several laps on the tires is a lot different than what you do for your qualifying lap. So I've done about 20 or so laps on this set of tires, and I want you to pay really close attention to how I'm using the throttle. So see, we're a lot slower in the mid part of the corner, and we're just getting back to the throttle, but not nearly as aggressive. And as you see coming off of the corner, I slowly feed the throttle back into the car as I'm unwinding the steering wheel. That keeps it balanced to where the rear of the car is still trying to kick around and help us turn, but we're not spinning out and we're not going too straight, so we're going to hit the wall. We're finding this perfect balance point with the throttle and whatever steering I'm using, that I'm making the car cooperate, but I'm not asking too much of it. Kind of like, so right here, I feel the car get light as I'm getting back to the throttle. That's why we back out of the steering just a little bit, and we hold it there with the throttle until we start our, actually exit the corner. Then you feed back in the throttle as much as you can. If you treat the throttle kind of like a light switch, then what happens is the car gets stupid loose, maybe like 15 or 20 laps into the run, and it gets harder and harder to get any drive off out of the corner. Another good thing that this little video shows is watch how I'm entering the corner as well. We're entering high, and we're letting the car dive low. So we're not trying to enter low and pinch the corner, because that's going to create a lot more heat buildup in our front tires and going to make the car less responsive to turning in over time. So Charlotte's one of those tracks where you really want to be patient on how you let the car go down towards the line. You don't want to force it down there towards the blue line, but you do want to kind of let it rotate and roll that way. And right there, I added way too much throttle and had to chase after the car and save it. So if you get in the habit of doing that, it's just going to be burning off those rear tires. The kind of final point that I have today is I've noticed a couple comments of asking, how do you save tires at certain tracks? And I don't have a lot of advice on that subject, but I think Charlotte is a good place to practice a very key point of tire saving. I mean, to level with you, I'm not real great at saving tires either, and I learned the hard way at Charlotte on how to try to save tires. And that's not how you do it right there. Okay, so in this example, what I've tried to do is use too much steering lock on corner entry, basically through the whole corner. So what happens is, when you do this, is you're relying so heavily on the front tires to get through the corner, and you're not really using the rear tires. So you start burning them off, and the car gets harder to control and harder to keep off the wall. So in this corner, see, I'm turning, and as I'm adding steering into the car, I'm not turning any better. As a matter of fact, the car kind of wants to start going straighter. So you can think of the amount of work that your tires can do as like a 10-point scale. So they can use either, 5 points for turning and 5 points for acceleration or something like that, but you can't ever ask 11 or 12 points out of the tires. So essentially what's happening when you add too much steering lock is that you've already turned them and you're getting the maximum amount of work out of the tires that they can do while turning. And then you continue to turn the steering wheel trying to ask more and more of the tire, and it has nothing to give. So it's just scrubbing against the racetrack harder and harder, and you're scrubbing off more rubber and speed and generating a lot more heat that's going to make the tire less sticky. So if you're really trying to practice saving tires, I would say come to Charlotte with this car and find the steering angle that if you add any more, the car doesn't turn any better. And you want to stop turning the wheel at that point, and you want to do the rest of the work with managing the throttle and managing the weight of the car and kind of how you drive it down into the corner. That's going to help you quite a bit if you can kind of practice that and get that down. Okay, so if you're still watching the video, I've got a little bit of a bonus tip for you, and that's some advice on how to take off on restarts. I've already seen people in races wreck people around them because they spun the tires unexpectedly on a restart on really old tires. And you definitely do not want to do that. So here I've got probably 30 lap old tires, and we're going to start off in second gear. And you can see we get into the throttle and the car wants to spin up the track and then down the track, and you're just trying to manage the car. But do be aware that initially it's going to try to hook up to the right and try to turn up the track as you take off, because the car gets really, really light in the rear end. So on fresh tires for the race start and a restart, if you had just pit, you can probably get away with taking off in first gear. But on really old tires, it doesn't work out so well. It gets a lot harder to keep the car steady and straight. So taking off in second gear, while that might seem like it's a little bit slower, it's honestly really the same speed, but you're keeping the vehicle a lot more stable. You're keeping yourself safer and the drivers around you. Because trust me, I know from experience, nobody wants to be that guy that wrecks on a restart. So here we're going to take off in first. And look at that, the car's way looser, way less happy, and it's a lot more steering to try to keep it going. So if you can avoid doing that, I would recommend it. But definitely practice your restarts. If there's anything that you take time to practice this week, practice restarts. Alright guys, that's what I've got for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in for another track guide. I hope you got some more tricks for the track that you'll use this week. And let me know how your races are going this week. And I'm curious if anybody knows what the song is or the game that it's from that was playing while we were showing the track map. I'm actually really curious on if anybody knows that game. If you do, you're an OG. So take care everybody, and I will see you all in the next video.